Hi there everybody, Andrea here. It's obviously been a little bit of time since my last vlog. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus of sorts since roughly, I think it was the week I went on vacation in July, and since I've come back, things have just been so busy that on my free time I really just hadn't had much opportunity to get back into it. As of the last few weeks, I've really wanted to, and I really haven't been able to. But I thought with the 20th anniversary of September 11th that this was a good time to get back into my vlog. And you know, instead of doing something weather related, given the nature of this week and of course the 11th itself and how impactful it has been on American lives, I thought it would be a great opportunity to just talk about it, honor, remember, tell my story. It's not a major story compared to obviously somebody who might have had a family member involved with the terror attacks and whatnot. But you know, it's something that we all like to reminisce on and tell our story, because it's one of those things, as we talk about now year after year, you know where you were, you remember what was happening, you remember the story of how you came upon it that day, even if you didn't have a family member directly involved or a friend. And luckily for me, I can say that wasn't the case for me, but you know, because there are people who obviously that was a different story for, we want to honor and remember. So if you have a story and you're comfortable talking about it, please below comment and let us know, share it. That's what this day is for. It's for sharing, honoring, and remembering. So my story, like I said, it's not, you know, on par with some of the horrors that many experienced that day. But I was a freshman in high school. I remember that. I went to high school in the Philadelphia area and at Archbishop Prendergast High School. I was in a suburb just outside of Philadelphia growing up. My mom still lives there. I went to Catholic school for 13 years, and that high school was, you know, part of my education as well. And I remember I was in English class, obviously during the morning, because that's, you know, when they started and continued onward through the morning. This was all unfolding. And I just remember there was an announcement that came over this PA system saying that they would be sending us home. We knew something was happening, we didn't know what, and they didn't tell us what. There might have been some classes where the teachers did tell their students what was happening. I know my teacher, I believe she tried to turn on the TV and see if she could get one of the channels, local channels, to see, but it didn't happen. So we had early dismissal. We took SEPTA home. Where I lived, they sent a larger SEPTA bus to provide transportation for students, but it was so sudden that we didn't have that, so we had to ride one of the smaller ones that they usually would just send on the hour. And I remember, you know, nobody that at least I had immediate contact with knew what was going on. I never fully found out until I got home. However, we knew it was something serious, we just didn't know what. And on the bus, an incident happened that kind of led on that this was something pretty serious. Now, I remember being somewhat midway on the bus, sitting down, and there were kids near the back or other students near the back talking, joking, and somebody made some sort of comment. I didn't hear it, but some sort of comment about, yay, we're getting sent home, or yeah, I'm gonna get sent, you know, we're on our way home or something. Clearly these students, I say kids because I'm older now, but they were high school students, but clearly these students had no idea what was going on. And because we were riding with, you know, normal people that would ride those buses, a lot of them actually did know what was going on, and one of the people riding the bus yelled at them. And it was one of those, you know, uncomfortable moments where everybody gets quiet and looks at who's yelling, and, you know, yelled about, you shouldn't, you know, something serious is going on, you know, you don't joke about this. And then I remember just that uncomfortable moment of silence where everybody looked, was glad that that wasn't them that made that comment. But then even us who didn't know what was going on, we knew that this was real serious. And they did mention something about we're being attacked. I do remember that, the person who was yelling. And you know, in that moment, reflecting and looking back, I wish that they did tell us what was happening and why we were being sent home. I understand why they decided not to. I'm sure it came from, because you don't know. I mean, I have family on Long Island, my mom's extended family. My mom grew up in Brooklyn before her family moved out a little more west in New York. So I understand from the perspective of, you don't want somebody to find out, if this is one of their family members, you don't want them to find out like this. So I understand from that perspective, and I'm sure that's what they were thinking of. They were like, you know, you don't know whose families are being impacted, you know, and I know there were planes obviously that went to the Pentagon in Shanksville in Pennsylvania, so you had no idea whose family members were affected, because we all live in the mid-Atlantic and not necessarily everybody came from or grew up in that area. And, you know, my parents were one of those people that fell into that category. My parents, they moved to Philadelphia before I was born, but they didn't come from there. So I'm sure that was the reasoning. But since we were high school students, in hindsight, you know, I understand and I don't put blame, but I think the right decision would probably have been to treat us like adults and tell us what had happened. Although I understand, you know, the other side of it. So in no means is this a criticism. I just wish we had known, especially with how life-changing this was. You know, this affected every American on some level. I don't need to tell you this. We all know that to some degree, we were impacted. Whether it was you had a family member that was involved, you were involved, a friend that was involved, or a friend of a friend, whatever that connection is, or, you know, it just changed the way we looked at things and how we acted, particularly, of course, with air transportation after that. So on some level, we were impacted, each and every one of us. And I remember, you know, I finally got home, turned on my TV, or my mom, I don't remember if my mom was home. I know we were watching, I'm pretty sure it was CBS's coverage at the time, and I believe it was Dan Rather he was with CBS, right? He had to have been. I know it was Dan Rather's coverage, and I believe it was CBS. My memory escapes me, so I don't know if he did network jumping or whatnot, but I know he was with a time for CBS. But I remember his coverage. That just happened to be what we turned on and who we listened to. And, you know, I had always wanted to be a meteorologist, but I was never like a news person. I would watch the Weather Channel. So, I mean, that was probably, as somebody who is in TV news now, the first really captivating moment of news coverage where you know, it's obviously for an infamous reason, but you were captivated as you watched in horror what happened. The replay of the first tower collapsing, and then the second, and then as you were learning about what was happening later on with the Pentagon, and then the plane that crashed in Shanksville. I just remembered the horror, but yet at the same time you couldn't turn away because you knew that this was, by all means, I think a good comparison, although I'm not saying one is worse than the other, a good comparison. I always thought of this as the Pearl Harbor that would happen in my lifetime, an attack that happened on US soil in many ways, and you just knew that this was, you know, like Pearl Harbor, and like that President FDR at the time said, a day that would live in infamy. You knew just watching that. And when you knew that this was not an accident after the second plane, you knew it was planned. You knew that this had that kind of effect. So, you know, year after year, we've always said it's important to never forget. And every year you make that effort to remember, to think about the first responders who put their lives on the lines, and do so every day. You know, you take for granted how they run towards the chaos, while we're trying to get out and get away and get to safety. They put their lives on the lines. And, you know, these people gave the ultimate sacrifice. And you can imagine, you know, they didn't have a TV turned on. They couldn't watch it like us. They went into this probably knowing even less maybe than we did, a lot of them. All they knew was that this tragedy, this catastrophe was happening, and they were going and trying to save as many people as they could in and around the vicinity. And then even afterwards, they dealt with the cleanup and trying to find answers and, find anybody that was still missing so that the families had a chance of getting some closure and something to bury and to mourn. And, unfortunately, there are still some to the day that couldn't even get that. And then I don't remember if we had off from school the next day after that, but I do remember a newspaper. My parents got the local paper, and one of the pictures on the local paper, of course, the front page was this. But I remember that the cloud of smoke from this particular image of the buildings, the Twin Towers burning, I just remember that cloud of smoke and how it looked like the face of Satan in that cloud of smoke. It wasn't, how you look at those blob pictures and you see things and you're trying to see something that's not there. Many of us thought distinctly that same newspaper print, that front page, we weren't the only ones that thought that. A lot of people thought that. And that just kind of added to how evil that was. I mean, anything war related or that's an attack is obviously evil, but it's just images like that that just give that very foreboding sense. And obviously it led to many things afterwards. I mean, our troops finally are home from Afghanistan 20 years later. We had more that finally, nearly 100, I think, that got brought home this week. And I think there still are some more to get out, and hopefully they will be, they will get out safely and soon, because for lack of better words, that's a mess, and that's a mess that will probably only get messier. So it's just, for better or for worse, 20 years later, it's done. It will never really 100%, I think, ever be done, but it's just, finally, after how many lives lost, going into Afghanistan and arguably Iraq, it had consequences that were ongoing and forever changed how you fight, because this was just, something that was entirely different. The war on terror and terror attacks, it opened up a new way that others could harm us, or other countries too, for that matter. It changed everything as we knew. And, not only do you think about, those brave people, our troops who went to war afterwards trying to stop the Taliban, and we hope that they do not come back, and we hope that the new Afghanistan government will not allow that to happen. But I mean, we'll see. I sure hope that, somehow there will at least be some sort of peace, and that Al-Qaeda especially will not gain grounds again. But, I'll leave that open-ended, because we can only wait and see at this point. But it gives you not just a respect for the troops, but also first responders too, because you think about how they go into these things not really knowing what's happening a lot of the times, and they put their lives on the line, for that, for us, just each and every day. It might not necessarily need to be something huge and terrible. It could be something like back in York years ago, the firefighters that lost their lives trying to stop a burning building, or any first responders for that matter who are in the vicinity and trying to help, or even the residual effects. Firefighters in general are more likely in their lifetime to end up with a lung issue or a lung condition than we are, because of their exposure to that sort of, those sort of irritants, chemicals. Yes, chemicals, because it's not nice fire that's burning, it's electrical stuff, it's Lord knows what metals and whatnot that are burning. So this is not like your bonfire, obviously, in the backyard. There's other stuff that's in that other particulates, excuse me, that can cause trouble. So, you know, we remember, of course, for so many reasons, each and every year. Like I said, I was fortunate to not be affected, although yes, my parents do have family. My mom has family from Long Island, and the worst of it was one of her cousins that she's particularly close with. Her husband had to walk home over the bridge that day. Long walk, sure. Couldn't travel, of course, because everything was shut down, but he got home and he still got home safely, which was all that mattered at the end. And, you know, fortunately, our family on Long Island was safe through all of this. But it makes you appreciate, you know, it really truly makes you appreciate the sacrifices of the individuals who choose this line of work. Or it's volunteer for many. A lot don't get paid for it too. Even then, you know, even if you're paid for it, I don't think takes away from the bravery or the self-sacrifice that's involved each and every day, knowing that, you know, you take for granted that these people, whether it's something small and like the fire that happened in York or something large scale like this tragic event, these people can still lose their lives each and every day, and they go into work every day knowing that too. And even any other kind of first responder, whether it's your police or your EMS, anybody who kind of falls under that umbrella, when you think about ground zero and the debris and how it traveled and the radius that it affected, it impacted them too. They put their lives on the line as well. And I mean, all the more reason that we can't ever and should never forget and remember time after time every year. So take a moment today, as all of us I'm sure will, to remember and to honor and to know that it takes a certain kind of bravery to each and every day know that something like that could happen to you. And it takes a lot from the families too to support that choice, because, you know, it's not just the sacrifice of the individual, the families are sacrificing too, because they support that. And the families, you know, are at loss more than we are, obviously. And we need to thank them and respect them just as much as the individuals that lost their lives that day, whether it was somebody who just went to work in that building doing their job that day, or our first responders who went into the line of fire to try to save and protect whoever they could at that time. So I'll leave it on that note that we, you know, it was a great reminder of how we can come together as a nation, as Americans. And I hope, you know, it is a very divisive political spectrum nowadays, and has been for a while. And I hope that we can look back and we can remember that sense of unity and remember that, you know, we're all Americans. We all want the same thing. We all want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We just might have different views on how to get there. And I hope that we can, you know, look back on that, the sacrifices that were made, you know, by anybody and everybody that day, all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and beliefs, and that we can find some common unity and remember, because I look back and I think about the unity, and I miss that unity that we had after 9/11, especially after, I mean, I was a high school student, but I think everybody remembers the debacle that was the 2000 presidential election. And I remember that sense of unity after, and how it was wonderful that we could all come together after that for this. And I hope I hope it doesn't take something like this ever to get that unity back. I want us to have that unity back. So think about that. Reflect, think about how we all want the same thing. And think about how think about, you know, at the end of the day, that's not what matters. What matters are the courage and bravery of this nation. And that is, I think, what's most important. So with that said, I want to say to those nearly 3,000 people, thank you. To the first responders, I appreciate the sacrifice, and to the families especially, because as we know, your loss was so much greater than ours that day in so many ways. So thank you as well. I'm going to end this vlog here. Next week, I promise it will be a weather-related theme, but I just felt, this week was a good time to start the vlog up again. But I also felt it would be, given the nature of the timing, very inappropriate to talk about anything other than weather, or other than, to talk about weather, I should say, and anything that, doesn't recognize this, because this was so impactful, of course. And again, something that we will never forget, especially upon the 20th anniversary. That just seemed too important for anything else. If there's anything weather related though that you would like covered in the week ahead, I don't think it's appropriate to put it under this vlog. I would want this to be a share your story of where you were, if you did know somebody, for example, but maybe reach out to me through Facebook or Twitter if you follow me, or my Instagram, and let me know if there's a topic that you would like covered instead, because I feel like the focus on this just has to be strictly the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. I hope you all have a wonderful and a safe weekend, everybody. Everyone coming home from Afghanistan, it just reminds you that safety is the most important thing. So I hope you all have a safe weekend. And of course, take that time to remember that whether it's prayer or some sort of reflection, that you think about it, you think about what happened, and you think about the families, in addition to obviously the people who have been gone now for nearly 20 years. Or maybe the people who, got sick and got ill and died sooner than they had to because of the exposure to ground zero in the months that followed. Because I feel like that shouldn't go unnoticed as well, or unrecognized. All right, on a little bit more of a positive note, everybody, again, have a wonderful weekend.